Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. With us today is M.K. Davis from Mississippi. But before we get to interviewing him, I'd like to make a real quick request. In Huntsville, I was talking to a man in line while we waited to talk to Bobo Fay, and he was telling me about orbs, Bigfoot, and disappearances in the area. And I was so busy taking notes that I never managed to get the man's contact information so I could just clear my notes with him before I read them over the air. So if you're listening and you sound like the man I was talking to, if you could just send me a quick email at strangethings@arkanasa.com, I would appreciate it. And now for our guest. M.K. Davis has been researching the Patterson Sasquatch film, or the P&G as we call it, for the last 20 years. He has traveled extensively and has amassed one of the largest collections of images from the film. MK has trekked the Bluff Creek drainage of Northern California on many occasions, and his observations have led to several important discoveries on the film itself. While the Patterson film is only a very short piece, it continues to yield a vital data that may one day lead to a more complete understanding of what it is that we see on the film, and it'll let us all know what's out there. Welcome to Strange Things.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
What do you... yes, sir?
Go ahead.
What do you do when you're not looking at Bigfoot videos?
You know, I used to do astronomy, and I'm sitting here in my man cave, and I'm looking at my telescope over there. It's put up in a case.
Mm.
And ever since I got into this, I love astronomy, but, I do prioritize. I think that this ultimately is more important.
Mm.
So getting a resolution to, number one, does Bigfoot exist, which that's long been resolved in my mind. But also, what is the nature of it? How does it relate to modern humans?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's more important. And so I stay on this. It's like I hate to use the word obsession, but that's what it is essentially. You in order to solve some problems, it takes an obsessive type of person. An example of an obsessive person would be Thomas Edison. He was once asked, how he got, how he invented so many things, and they were all important things to mankind. He said it was 15% inspiration, 85% perspiration. And essentially, that if you ever read anything on him, that's what it was. It was just a doggedly determined person.
What got you interested in Bigfoot? Was it the Patterson film or something before that?
Well, I'd have to say that in particular, it was two frames from the Patterson film that I came across. And I recognized that someone had filtered the images in order to see fainter detail, to boost contrast, and to correct some lensing problems. And that's exactly what you do in astrophotography. So that really piqued my interest. And they were so good that my experience tells me you can't get a fantastic frame like that from a bad film. The rest of the film has to be just as good. And so I began an inquiry because I believed that amongst all the puzzle and mysteries that affect mankind, that this was one that could tell its own story. Mm-hmm. And I believe that in the present form that the film is in, the very best versions of it do tell its own story.
So
really, essentially that's the stage that I'm at right now. The film is good. It's solid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in my personal opinion, that the film should be treated as a priceless piece of cinema instead of drugged through the dirt. So these people who have these programs where they show the film and then they get a skeptic to come in,
mm-hmm.
I do not recommend that at all, because the film is now at a stage where the skeptic's opinion weighs very little. And it's unfair to give them an equal weight when the film is this good.
Mm-hmm.
If the film was just in its original form, shaky and grainy, well, yeah, it can be this, it can be that. Everybody speculates, including the skeptics, but not anymore. I just think that their mouthpiece should be withdrawn. Yeah, especially the ones that do it professionally, that are skeptics professionally. You don't put something priceless like that in front of somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
They give it unfair treatment, and that should be stopped.
I agree with you 100% on that. Did seeing the film lead to your becoming a film analyst, or were you the film analyst first and then the film just happened?
Well, I was already into astrophotography, which I took space photos through my telescope, and it was kind of a foundation for a lot of things that I've done with the Patterson film. I would say that I burgeoned as an analyst with the Patterson film. I started with astrophotography.
Mm-hmm.
And the Patterson film, I was, because of my background, I recognized some, lensing defects and stuff that could be corrected using filtration. And I did that. And I produced my first hand-stabilized version of it at about 2 in.m. And when I hit the preview button, and my jaw dropped at just how good this was.
Mm.
So, I said, well, I'm not done yet, because this is a preliminary thing. There's more to be done. It's work. It's a lot of work. Most of it's done by hand, but it's just taking advantage of known things that you can do in a dark room, or in the case of digital photography, in a computer. And so it's not anything that's like magic or anything. It's just work.
Is this something? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, is this something you had to take classes on, or is it something you pretty much were self-taught?
Self-taught. Mostly. I've read a lot on it, but a lot of the stuff that I've done with the Patterson film, like this new type of processing, was invented specifically for the problems that exist with the Patterson. They can be applied to other films, but it was invented to correct problems with that film and to make that film put it in its best form. Everything was with a view to putting it in its best and most presentable, most viewable and understandable way. And so now it's at a point where it has crossed the threshold, and it is now a fantastic piece of footage.
Oh, yes.
And there's very little that can be argued against it, other than a person just arguing for the sake of arguing. You can identify easily on this film biomechanics, which is a whole other field. So if I've come across and I've met several professional skeptics in my journeys at these conferences and stuff, and I don't think that everything should be taken with any amount of garbage. I don't think that nobody wants to be taken in, but at some point in time, you've got to let go. You can't just be a bobblehead doll shaking your head sideways constantly. You know, you're putting in the garbage a priceless piece of cinema, and that's my words to the skeptics. You know, it's going to be a hard line from now on.
Say somebody out there. Yes, go ahead. Say somebody out there. Somebody out there wants to follow in your footsteps. They want to be able to analyze videos and do what you're doing. How would they go about getting started?
Well, you can start the way I started and just find a video that's piqued your interest and begin there. Begin an inquiry. Every project has a starting point, and you build on that. I'd be happy to share any of my secrets. I would welcome anyone who wanted to take it. There's a lot of room for it, and there's a lot good people are needed.
Do you have
and you have to be? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. There's a bit of a delay between your speaking and my speaking, so just go ahead and talk.
The lag time.
No, I'll let you say because you're the guest, and I'll try not to interrupt you.
Well, that's okay. You have to be, number one, you have to be prepare yourself to be honest. You can't emotionally attach to it. So whatever you're working on, you know, you can't refuse to see the defects and not see, you know, the other, and to only see the parts that you think are authentic. You have to kind of divorce yourself and don't follow your heart. You know, just put the film in its best form, and let the film or the video say what it can say about itself.
Do you have an original? Do you have an original version of the Patterson film?
That's an interesting question because nobody has an original version, and I've heard it over and over on TV shows that they're working with the original. No, you're not working with the original. The original has never been projected. You know, once copies were made, it was locked in a vault. And it has never been out of that vault. Wherever that vault is, it's still there.
Yikes. So many videos are copies of copies of copies, and as you make all these copies, it degrades the film. How bad has this affected your process?
It just depends. It's what you're looking at in your particular effort. You know, if you're looking at resolution, a copy is going to lose it with copying. If you're looking to produce a version that's fluid and has and stabilized, you can use a generated copy to do that. It's information that you're looking for. You can't expect too much, but the original film was far better than what you see in resolution. And I've got some frames that I got from Mrs. Patterson herself, and they are spectacular. They just will blow you away. And just that's what I said in the beginning, that somewhere out there's a better version of the film. My question is, why was it not shown? Why was only the worst possible versions of it shown to the public? And that's all part of the story. It's all part of the story of how the film came about and how the film has been treated down through the years by its handlers. So you don't always get what you think you should get. Somebody takes a spectacularly clear picture of a Sasquatch and they don't show it, but they swear it's real, but they don't show what would work. They don't show it.
About how many hours did you spend just running the film back and forth while you were looking at it?
Well, I've run a lot of it back and forth, but more than that, I've done frame by frame.
Mm-hmm.
Which, this process, a new processing method, probably has about 30 steps per frame.
Yikes.
Or maybe even more. I hadn't counted them, but it's a lot. And to produce one frame, and then you go through a process of what I call transitioning, or it's like you build a bridge between the frames to account for the slow shutter speed, so that you don't lose your cinematic effect and start flickering, because the film was shot at very slow shutter speeds. So that if the only way to smooth it out is to speed it up. And when you speed it up, then it looks like everything's made out of styrofoam. It's moving at some fantastic speed that defies physics.
That was, that was a big problem a lot of people had. They said, "Oh, it looks fake," because the way the creature moved.
It looks like the Keystone Cops. You remember the old Keystone Cops?
Yes.
They're shot at 9 frames per second, and they're just jumping around, flickering like mad. Look, it looks comedic.
Mm-hmm.
You slow that thing down to how it was shot, and it's just awe-inspiring.
You had to stabilize. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's you can't really do that unless you have treated the film and built those transition frames and added those to it, and then you can slow it down without it losing the lifelike quality.
You showed a stabilized video there at the conference, and you had Patty dead center on the screen, and then the edge of the film was jumping all over the place, which looked rather bizarre. How do you manage to do that with a film?
Well, I mean, that's all done by hand. There's several different ways you could stabilize, but if you want to take a look at the Sasquatch, then you stabilize her and let the background float wherever it may. Okay? But if you want to see how it looks for her walking across, then you stabilize the background itself and let her go where she may. So both of those, I've done it both ways. Both have information to yield. They're both very useful, but it's different information.
So how do you go about stabilizing the film? Do you have to take each film, each each image, and move it until it is centered, or do you tell the computer what to do?
Well, there's software now that will stabilize video, but it's very imprecise, and it's even more so when you're talking about a film that was shot at such slow shutter speeds, because that software constantly samples, and it's designed for 24 to 30 frames per second, and the Patterson film is shot at less than 16. So there's a lot of gap between the frames, and it throws that software off. It becomes difficult for the software to ascertain which things to line up. So that's a problematic. But I've done, and I still do, all of the Patterson film by hand.
Yikes! That sounds like a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. It's a lot of work.
In your film, you can see the muscle movement as well as the mouth opening and closing. With this in hand, what do you say to these people that claim it's some guy in a suit?
I'd say go get a life. Nobody has been in that. That's no suit. It doesn't take a genius. You see the versions that I've done. You saw a little sample up there.
Yes.
It's no suit could be made like that. Yeah. Especially when you listen to those people give their testimony, and you realize that they're lying their tails off. Like, for instance, Bob Hieronymus said that while he was down there, that he said the sand was white. And sir, there's no white sand down there.
Mm-hmm.
It's shale sand. It's got an oil in the shale. You've heard of shale oil?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when the sun shines on the shale, it's got a sheen to it, and photographically it will turn white real easy. It'll turn a light blue on a first gen, and then if you go to the second gen, it'll turn white, because anytime you copy a positive to a positive, it builds contrast, and the lighter colors get lighter, and the darker get darker.
Mm-hmm.
So he's seen only the generated copies, like third generation, which washed out to white. And he thought the sand down there was white. He's never been there.
Mm-hmm. What are we up to? Like 13 different people have claimed to have been in the suit?
Yeah, bunches of them. And they all swear. I'll take the lie detector test. That's the first thing they say.
Mm-hmm.
All they're doing is saying, I'm good enough liar to pass a lie detector test. It's just, it needs to be stopped. The circus thing has got to stop.
Well, you'd think if Roger Patterson had actually built this suit, he would have gone to Hollywood and said, look what I can do, and he'd have been a millionaire, as opposed to he really never made any money off of the film, did he?
I don't know. He may have made some. He went on a tour, a live tour, showing the film and giving a presentation like I did,
Mm-hmm.
But, they kept I think they sold tickets to some of them they put a bucket out there,
Mm-hmm.
But he made some money doing that. His biggest mistake was trying to make money first.
Yes.
And he should have never let a scientist look at that film until he let a professional photographic person clean it up and straighten it up.
Were you able
Go ahead.
Were you able to enhance the entire movie or just the sections that you showed?
I've worked on all of it, but there again, it's what do you call all of it? The film that they show on television and stuff is an edited version of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's got stops and starts in it. And because of that, you don't really know how much of an interlude took place between stops and starts. Mm-hmm. There's no way to determine that unless someone told you. So if it's like, if I were to be filming you and I stop the camera and then I wait 30 minutes and start filming you again, how is anyone going to know how long? Was it 30, an hour? Was it a year and an hour?
Mm-hmm.
There's no measurement of that intermediate time that's lost. So that film has that in it. It's got stops and starts, and I call them walk sequences. The first walk sequences ends with her over there near the tree line. The second one begins with her out on the sandbar, moving upstream in an open stance. How long? The story doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to listen to the story, you might as well quit analyzing the film. Yeah, the film itself needs to tell you what happened and what went on. And so that's my aim on that. They can tell me there's lots of flaws in the story, and people recognize that right off. Way back in '67, they recognized that I think he had Color 2 had a 2-week turnaround time. Only 2 places in the United States even developed it. And they took the film on a Friday and showed it on a Sunday. That's very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But people questioned them and they got huffy, and then they didn't want to answer it, and they just shrugged their shoulders, and then finally people quit asking. But to be honest with you, this film is good enough that it doesn't really need their story.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need anybody to vouch for it. It'll vouch for itself.
How did the hair come into play when Patty was walking?
When you were talking about my presentation, when
yes,
I
sir.
was talking about the hair,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's that's a rather new discovery. It's a few years old, but if it pans out, and it's what I think and what other people think as well that's seen it, that the Bigfoot or Sasquatch has hair on its body that is translucent or reflective and refractive, and also like a fiber optic, that it can conduct light down through the shaft. And then when a light breaks out at some kind of a point where there's a bend or where there's some kind of irregularity in the hair, well, then it just shifts over to another hair.
Mm-hmm.
And it just moves across the back. And what you get there is the light tones or green tones or brown tones that it's close to will reflect, will just flood the back and turn the whole back into that tone. And when she moves away and the sunlight changes angles, then it all goes away instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So that it explains a lot of things. It explains a lot of things on the Patterson film and on the Paul Freeman footage and some other that are fairly, you can be fairly confident that they are Bigfoot films. It's not like cloaking, but it's manipulating light to where it's hard to pick them out. And if she had stood there by that tree and just stopped, they might have lost sight of her, the camera person, because her back was almost white.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost the color of that alder. So you could lose her real easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a person wonder, how many others could have been there that were standing by a tree motionless. And they were, their hair was such that they assumed the tone of the tree.
Just blending into the background.
Right. And it works less in dimmer light. If the sun's real bright, that effect works real well. The best time to see a Sasquatch based on that would be 30 minutes before dark or 30 minutes after daylight. When that effect is not so prominent.
The Paul Freeman film, when and where was it shot?
It was shot near Walla Walla, Washington. And this is kind of over in the eastern side where it's a little drier. And it's there's a town right above Walla Walla. There's a creek, rather, called Mill Creek. And they get their water. They had watersheds to catch water for the town.
Mm-hmm.
So this was in one of those watersheds up in Mill Creek, up in the mountains above Walla Walla. And there was restricted access to it because they didn't want people going up there and poisoning the water or whatever. And he was an employee on the Forestry Service, so he could go up there. And it's like so many things, and lots of animals will discover that there's, for whatever reason, there's not very many people there, and they'll tend to gravitate toward those places. Maybe perhaps the big Bigfoot did as well.
Were you able to analyze the film?
Oh yeah. I've looked that thing over real well. It's different than Patty, and I think I got into that on my presentation there in Texas. But it still has that hair, probably more of the hair effect on that one than on Patty. This one just literally vanished right in front of the guy. He couldn't find it with the camera. Took the camera down. He says, "Jesus." He brings the camera back up to where it was, and this thing is just sitting there staring at him. It's completely invisible to him. And when it finally started to walk, then you could pick it up and follow it. It had been sitting there staring at him, you know, and he couldn't pick it out or find it, and he was just he was in peril. And that's what the point I was hoping to make was that particular type of Bigfoot that leaves this track that looks like an hourglass, and the toes are forward on the track, and they're splayed out like sausages. Those kinds are what I call the true giants, and they are a lot more likely to hurt you. So, you know, I was hoping to make that point, that impression, so that people could be aware of it if they come across that type of track or see that type. They're pretty brutish looking. The Patterson subject, less so. Its footprint looks more like a giant version of our own, and she looked a lot less brutish, you know, a lot less like an upright walking ape. I can see where somebody might get that from the one in the Paul Freeman video. And it walks differently too. Patty's got a smooth gait that leaves her head almost motionless. It doesn't bob much. Where you watch the Paul Freeman and it's kind of up and down, up and down. It's a different type of build to it.
You talk about
you just don't want you don't want to irritate one another.
Yes. You talk about how the Hoopa Indians would behave if they had a Bigfoot encounter. You want to tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, the Hoopas said this. They said if you encounter one, speak to it in whatever language you know, whatever it's your language, and at the same time back away and get some clearance and then run. The purpose for that was to confuse the Bigfoot and to get it to thinking maybe that you had other people with you. If you had other people with you, it might not attack you. If it can't see who you're talking to, well, then it doesn't know everything it needs to know. Maybe another person there with a rifle, you know. So it's less inclined to want to do so. But if you watch that one, it stared at Paul Freeman, and that wasn't a friendly stare.
Kind of a predatory.
And Paul Freeman could have come out on the bad end of that.
There's the Ape Canyon incident, the story told to Teddy Roosevelt by a man named Bauman. Do you know of any other accounts of Bigfoot attacking someone?
Well, I mean, you hear individuals, you know, all the time. The most poignant accounts are the ones where the people are missing. They can't talk about it. You know, recently David Pilates had a series of books on that. He doesn't really say their Bigfoot got anybody, but at least a number of those are probably Bigfoot related. And if something can just back up to a tree and you can't see it, and you get within 10 feet of it, you might be lunch. If it's the type, if it's the right type, if it's one of those true giants. The true giants are also the Ron Moorhead up in the High Sierra camp when he took some very famous audio recordings. Those tracks that he took photos of are true giants.
Yikes.
And you don't want to be alone with one of them. You know, and there was one that was 25 inches long, but he only recently published that because he was afraid people would ridicule. But he found this track up there at the 10,000 foot level in the Sierras. It's 25 inches long with a 13-foot stride.
Yikes. That's big.
Well, there's no way that is any of us. That's not a human being. And they found similar tracks in ash beds, fossilized ash beds in Mexico that were absolutely true giants. So I know that they were around 1.3 million years ago when there were no modern humans. So they are a hominid. They are close enough to a human being that, given enough tries and enough exposure to humans, they can produce an offspring. And that's what the Hoopa said happened when they had 10,000 Chinese in there, as well as long periods of time. Mostly what you see in the Bluff Creek area are the offspring. They're the hybrids.
Mm.
They have the foot-like patty that looks like an overgrown version of our feet, with some differences, but basically. But you rarely ever run into anything that's like what you see in the Paul Freeman. So that's kind of where it is. That's where you're going to see most of your hybrids, is in the Bluff Creek area. You get away from there, away from that gold area where the woods were flooded with all those people during the gold rush. Get away from that, and you're going to find mostly the true giants. And the true giants is, the original hominid.
Tell us about the 1 pound Bigfoot burger incident.
That was just wild, and that's one of those strange things that happen that you don't even know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Willow Creek and I accompanied some Japanese gentlemen who wanted to shoot some video around there for a documentary in Japan, and then go to the Patterson site. And they were kind of caught up with Willow Creek, and they had been to the museum, and so they were eating at this place called it's actually called the Bigfoot Restaurant now, but it used to be called Cinnabar Sands. And they had a 1 pound Bigfoot burger on the menu. I mean, it was a monster. This little bitty fella could speak no English, just became obsessed with that big burger. He filmed himself eating one, then he filmed himself eating another one. Finally, he downed 3.
Jeez.
And these people were all staring at him and stuff. And this was over a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
But still quite a feat. And there was a young man sitting over there just behind him, and he was a tall, lanky kid with, I call him a kid, like his early 20s, and had long, curly hair. And he was busy writing on a napkin. And I didn't notice what he was writing. I noticed that he was writing on a napkin, and he left ahead of us. And then when we left, on our windshield under the wiper was that napkin. And we got it and looked at it. He drew a cartoon with 2 frames. One of them, the Bigfoot is about to walk behind a tree, and the second one, the Bigfoot disappears into the tree. And there's a question mark, and then there's some writing down there that I didn't know what it was. And later on, I got a friend of mine who recognized it, and he translated it, and it was Russian. The writing was in Russian. And it said, "Look, I am here." And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was essentially drawing in cartoon form what you could see actually happening on the Patterson film. That on the Patterson film, when the Bigfoot gets really near that alder, then the light from that alder floods its back, and it literally becomes the color of the alder on its back. And it appears to walk into the alder.
Mm-hmm.
If it stopped right at that time, it would have been just like the cartoon the guy drew. It would have appeared to go right into that tree. And somehow that person knew that. and he drew that little cartoon and left it there for me and I guess the other two guys.
You no longer have the napkin?
But I never did have it. I didn't ask for it. They took it back to Japan.
Mm.
I regret that, but I did take some good pictures of it.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
I do regret it because to me I don't know who this person was,
mm-hmm.
but they had a special knowledge, and I would have liked to know they were obviously from a foreign person,
mm-hmm.
But they knew something that was specific to Sasquatch, and you know, way ahead of the game there, way ahead of everyone else. It didn't show until later in the film when I was reprocessing the film that I actually saw what was on that napkin.
What did you spot in Patty's hand?
That I don't know. It's something that's undetermined. I do know this,
mm-hmm.
that it's heavy. I know that it's heavy because she counterbalances it with the other arm, and I know that it's by far larger than her hand. When I first saw that and I made it public, some people were saying, "Well, that's just the palm of her hand." But I found it in 3 or 4 other places, and it's bigger than a baseball mitt.
My wife said it's her purse.
Pardon?
My wife said it was her purse. Since Patty
we think about things along the lines of what we know about life,
mm-hmm.
That's where a woman would carry the purse, maybe with a strap to.
Yep.
But occasionally she would take her hand off, and you'd see the hand, and it'd just be a normal sized hand. But I got to looking, and what it appears to be is that it's being suspended on her left side and steadied by her left hand, but not carried by it.
Mm-hmm.
She keeps it from swinging and keeps it out of view on the left side. And the Russians who did a study on the film in the 70s, they said in their study that her left side was abnormally inactive. It was not being swung in the normal biomechanical way for walking. That she favored her left arm,
mm-hmm.
and that got explained all these years later with some good technology.
Have you had a Bigfoot encounter of your own?
Yes, sir. I've had several. I've had 2 down at Bluff Creek, and 1 in Louisiana, and several others that were, I wasn't really sure. I've got a dog that's barking here. You'll have to forgive me. It's coming up.
Every once in a while, my cat will do that.
He's just doing his job.
Somebody at the door?
My daughter is coming in. She doesn't know that I'm in giving the interview, so he's barking at her. It'll quiet down.
I have had just about any kind of interruption imaginable, so a dog barking is nothing. I had a cat run across the keyboard one time and completely switched the program off, and it took me forever to turn it back on, so a dog barking is nothing.
Well, it looks like everything's calm now.
Mm-hmm. So you had 2 at Bluff Creek and 1 in Louisiana. Were they similar to each other, or was the one in Louisiana was far different from the ones in California?
The one in Louisiana was a young one, and it came across in front of my truck at night, and it was running. It had an oval-shaped head. It was on all 4s, and it came across very, very swiftly, and it ran what I call a giant rabbit. The way a rabbit runs, it pulled its rear legs way up forward, and then pushed and pulled and pushed and pulled and stayed low.
Mm-hmm.
If it hadn't crossed right in front of my truck, I would have never seen it because the grass where I was driving on this old dirt road was beat down. It stayed under the grass otherwise, except when it was about to enter the woods, it made a bound and went into the woods. The feet were long, slender, and had kind of a pointed, I won't say pointed foot heel, but it was a narrow heel.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't look like Patty. And this would be like a small version of the Freeman thing, probably maybe 100 pounds. Of course, my computer in my mind went to no match found. I was fortunate that someone else saw it. I didn't want to be the only one who saw it.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel anything at the time, like a feeling of dread or anything like that?
No, I haven't. I've been more afraid of things that weren't Bigfoot than I thought were.
Because I've heard about
when it comes down to actually in the presence of one, for whatever reason, I never felt dread.
I've heard about 30% of Bigfoot sightings are accompanied by a smell, but I've also heard people talk about this overwhelming feeling of terror that they've had when encountering a Bigfoot. I was just wondering what that could possibly be related to.
There's a lot of speculation about that. We don't really know what the capabilities of them are.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of have to take things at face value. In my encounters at Brook Creek, I did not feel that. The encounter I had in Louisiana, the one I was telling you about,
mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that. But I have felt fear at what I thought was a Bigfoot, but I never actually saw it. At Brook Creek, when I had the Japanese guys down there, we found a trackway going across the sandbar where the film was taken. And this trackway, the tracks were like 4 inches deep, 10 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that it was really heavy because I couldn't even make a dent. And later that night, the Japanese guys had stayed up because they were afraid. And they had a bell that they were ringing all night. And they woke me up and they told me that they heard something. Something was out there. And I woke up and I listened for a little while and I heard a twig snap. And it was something out there. And I got the flashlight and I took off running and tried to get behind it and cut it off and put the light on it. And that's when they panicked and they started hollering and screaming for me to come back. And I didn't feel any fear,
mm-hmm.
but I can't explain why, because I have at other times felt it when I wasn't even sure it was a Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was actually in the presence of one, I've never felt it. And I guess it's like this though. If you have no place to run to, you won't run.
Mm-hmm.
It's that fight or flight type of thing.
If someone was going to shoot a video, what would you tell them as far as how to do it, how to make the film?
Well, it's difficult to shoot a video because it's difficult to choose the right lens, the right equipment for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a photo shoot. So I would say this, that if you film a Sasquatch, make sure someone else is filming you film it.
Mm.
Because the people will swear that you had everything to do with setting up a situation,
Mm-hmm.
So to make that film work for a discovery film, you want to make sure that you document yourself in the act of filming so that people will know. If you've got a partner, have 2 video cameras.
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
You get to 2 different angles, 2 different perspectives, so people will know positively and can have confidence in it.
The PG film was shot on a handheld, spring-driven, manual focus camera. Do you find people relying on electronic automatic cameras, they're developing some really bad film, or are they getting good film?
It just depends. Like I said, it's not a photo shoot, so you don't know whether the Bigfoot's going to jump out 10 feet from you or if he's going to be 500 yards. And you need, now some of these, the old cameras like Roger had rotating turrets, and you could choose different ones, but your mind can't function that well in the heat of a situation like that. Roger Patterson had a K100, but he also had a Bolex with him. And not a lot of people know that. A Bolex is a professional camera for shooting movie-quality documentaries and stuff. So, which did he use? Well, he says he used a K100. But there again, you have to just divorce yourself from the story and say Roger Patterson had 2 cameras with him. It is undetermined which one he was using.
Well, his horse fell over and landed on him. He had to scramble to get one of the cameras out of the saddlebag, so I imagine in the heat of the moment, he had no idea what he had grabbed.
Well, they even argue about that. If you read the February 1968 interview with Ivan Sanderson, they argue about it. And later on, to this day, Bob says that Roger did not do that he made that up. So that's why you say you can't go with the story. You can't. As tempting as it is, it's unprofessional people that took this film. You know, and they an unprofessional person will behave unprofessionally if he wants to put himself in a different light or wants to put something else that happened there in a different light. So you have to just go with what you see on the film. You know, and the film does not tell you that he fell off the horse. It doesn't. The film does not even tell you that Roger Patterson took it.
That's true.
It don't show either one of the gentlemen. On the leader, it does. You know, when they're showing the walking up the creek, showing the horses, and that's all I add on. You know, that was shot at some other time and added to make the film longer because the original film didn't last but a minute. So, you know, when you go to these live events, they used to have one where they showed a reenactment where Roger would fall off his horse and pull out his thing, and they had a couple of actors acting like them. And they had that on the lead. But the actual video of the creature doesn't show anyone on it.
Are there any other...
So, you know,
yes,
go ahead.
Are there any other films you've looked at that you consider to be genuine, like the last few you've mentioned?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of them that I feel pretty good about, but I can't say with a great deal of positiveness that it is. But I feel that I can with the Paul Freeman. I think that is actually a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, true giant Bigfoot. And Mr. Freeman is lucky to have lived through it, and we owe a debt to him, you know, for hanging in there and getting that.
Looking for Bigfoot is a lot of work. You have to travel out into some pretty desolate locations. Do you spend a lot of time out there, or do you try to make just short trips?
Well, I the longer you spend out there, the better as far as upping your odds of some kind of evidence or encounter or whatever. But I've been to Bluff Creek probably, I think, 9 times. With that last trip. And I've been, untold other places all across the country. Honey Island down in South Louisiana. I've been to Green Swamp in Florida. I've been to Nevada caves in Idaho, caves in Nevada, Death Valley, Oregon, Washington State. It's one day I'll chronicle all of those, and they've all turned up a lot of interesting things. But the the film of the Patterson film and the Freeman film is they're special, and they're very difficult to duplicate.
I read something about a Bigfoot massacre. Is that something you'd talk about, or is that somebody else's story?
Well, it's not my. I didn't come up with that term. That someone else did. But the only thing I ever said about it was that I did not disagree with it. And I have my own reasons for that. And it involves a lot of information that I know about the Patterson film. But it's not something that I really wish to get into or to push or it's all of the players have just about gone, and I don't really favor pressuring those that are left. They can talk if they want to talk, but if they don't talk, then that's them. I'm not a judge. God is judge of all. So, I worked on the film, and I got the film in its best form. And how they got the film is they'll have to account for that.
That was just something I read about when I was preparing for the show, and it sounded...
Yeah, I understand. It went all over the place, and I got a lot of ill treatment for it, but it's nothing but somebody shooting the messenger.
Okay.
There's more to the story. That's all I can say about it, and how they got the film. It's a lot less heroic.
Do people send their videos to you, or do you contact them whenever you see a film that you want to analyze?
Mostly people will contact me and ask me to look at it. And I don't mind doing that. I really appreciate the hard work people put into this, and I really admire anybody that's willing to don the mantle of Bigfoot researcher. It comes with a lot of unthankful tasks.
Oh yes.
If you've done it, so it's and you're going to have a lot of nothing happen. But then again, somebody's going to run into a situation, and like the Patterson film and then the other film, the Freeman film, there were special situations that prompted that encounter. So somebody's going to walk into one like that, some special situation, and get something like that. I really would appreciate it if they would send it to me and let me work on it. And if they don't send it to me, get it to somebody that can put it in its best form.
Have you gotten any films from someone who said, "Here, would you take a look at this, but don't tell anybody about it"?
Yes, I have. I sure have.
Were they good, believable videos, or so-so?
They were good, believable videos.
I always hate it when people do that.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. I remember the first trip I made to Bluff Creek. These people had, sponsored me, picked me up at the airport, put me down there. And I got back and I had all these wonderful pictures, and then they emailed me and said, "I don't want my picture anywhere. Don't show my picture." Well, he was in all of them. Effectively, I had nothing I could show for my efforts. If he had told me, I would have made a point not to offend him. But that's I learned from that, and I asked people, somebody wants to go somewhere with me, do you mind, being filmed? Because I enjoy posting the stuff and disseminating information and the kind of things that you work for. to have somebody, just, nullify it all. But there again, that's the years of experience. You learn how to do things. There are ways to talk about things, and there are ways to not talk about them, and there are ways to, it's a Bigfoot savvy, and I would like to think that after all these years that I've developed some Bigfoot savvy, and I want everybody to be my friend. I realize that not everybody's going to be, but I want everybody to be friendly with me. I'm not out to hurt feelings or anything like that. And so I do try to do things in a way that spares people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't believe that that's a Bigfoot on their video, I will try to put it in such a way that it gets them to look closer at it.
What kind of software? Keep going.
Yeah, go ahead.
What kind of software do you need to analyze these films? Is it something special or just something off the shelf?
It's off the shelf. It's I got particular programs that I like, but sometimes I use 3 or 4
mm-hmm.
in the procedure. I will trade from one to the other to get a specific thing done.
Have you, or are you going to write a book?
I've actually got about 50 pages written of a book, and I just need to get off my behind and finish it. But the awkward thing about it is that it doesn't seem to be an end to it. The final chapter is always out there, not yet having happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel kind of like that, and so I'm less inclined to want to rush out with a book and then leave stuff out that happens after you've already published. So that's kind of where I feel about it. But I feel adequate to write a book, but in some ways, I don't feel that adequate, because I feel like there's more like this new procedure. If I'd written the book 2 years ago,
mm-hmm.
none of that would have been in it.
I see.
And it's absolutely mind blowing. How well it works. So you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever look at or analyze videos that don't have anything to do with Bigfoot, say ghosts, UFOs, anything like that?
I have done some work for UFO people.
Hmm.
I've done some work on the Zapruder assassination film.
Nice. Uh-huh.
And I've done some work on the Orville Nix presidential assassination film. And I was very, very honored to have been chosen by the Nix family to do that, and so I put it in its best form
mm-hmm. for
them. It's all of those are hard to watch,
mm-hmm.
So, but they're historically speaking, for the good of all,
mm-hmm.
It's best to put them in their best forms so that everything can be seen. And so I've done that.
So say the group that I hang around with, I'm not a member, but I'm associate, the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. Say they get a really good UFO video, you'd feel good if we were to send it to you for analysis?
Yeah, I would work on it and give it my best shot at. I'd give it its due.
Mm-hmm.
It all has to do with how good your
yes.
original raw footage is. If it's pretty good, you can probably push it quite a ways.
Any
Stabilization, because most people take the UFO footage at full zoom, and you see a lot of hand motion in it. It jumps around, and it's hard to hold on it. A lot of that could be mitigated.
How's that?
I said a lot of that shakiness in those full zooms can be mitigated, with software, and you can break it down frame by frame and line things up and take a lot of that shakiness out of it.
Like what you did with the Patty.
Right.
Well, do you have any words of advice you'd like to pass on to the audience before I let you get back to your life?
Well, this is the word of advice that I have. When you get a chance and can watch the latest version that I have of the Patterson film, sit down and watch it, and make up your own mind whether you think it's real or not. If you think that it is real and it moves you, consider taking up the cause. If there's a real need for more people in the field and more boots on the ground, and you don't want to feel like you're spinning your wheels, so watch that video first. But if you feel like that's real, then you know that it's possible because it's already been done. While it's unlikely, it's not impossible that you can have your own encounter and your own discovery. So whoever can come up with it, I support any and all. And I encourage anybody that's, especially younger people, if you've got a good open mind and you're clever and you can come up with solutions to problems and take it and apply it to this particular subject. And that's my advice. We need you. Bigfoot needs you.
I appreciate you being on the show, sir, and I'd like to...
Thank you for having me.
I'd buy you dinner, but we already had dinner together there in Huntsville.
Well, maybe one day I'll buy you one. Buy you a lunch.
Well, I do appreciate you being on the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
This has been M.K. Davis speaking to us about Bigfoot in the Patty video. Are you taking care of your skin, or are you going to wait and see how time treats you? Take care today by contacting Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, at 956-723-3019. Don't let time get the best of you.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.